A massive tiger shot dead by German police after brutal attack on keeper near Leipzig. A tiger that escaped from a private animal facility near the German city of Leipzig was shot dead by police after seriously injuring a man inside its enclosure, according to local media reports and authorities. Now it's time to break down every angle of this story on our AI podcast.
So think about this for a second. What is the exact moment like a 500-pound apex predator just turns back into a wild animal?
Right. It's a terrifying question.
It is. And last Sunday, in this really quiet suburb in Germany, a 73-year-old man found out that the transition takes, well, less than a second. Today, we are looking at the fatal flaw in the illusion of the whole exotic pet industry.
Yeah, you have this highly localized environment, right? And it's built entirely on the conviction that human conditioning can somehow just override millions of years of evolutionary survival instinct.
Right, which is wild.
Exactly. And then completely without warning, biology just forcefully reasserts itself.
Okay, let's unpack this. We're looking at a deeply shocking incident that took place near Leipzig, Germany. Using recent local media reports and official statements from authorities, we're diving into the collision between private exotic animal ownership, the business of wildlife entertainment, and obviously public safety.
Which is a huge collision.
Right. And to understand how this happened, we really have to look at the psychology of the people involved. So the police report details an attack on a Sunday at a privately owned industrial site near the town of Schkeuditz.
Yeah, right near Leipzig.
Yeah. And a 73-year-old man was attacked by a tiger. But here's the thing. He wasn't standing near the fence. He wasn't observing from a platform. He was actually inside the enclosure with the animal.
Inside, yeah.
He sustained serious injuries, requiring emergency medical attention. And I just keep thinking, why is a 73-year-old man stepping inside the enclosure of a wild predator in the first place?
It's the ultimate false sense of security.
Exactly. It's like stepping into a shark cage only to realize, oh wait, the bars are made of plastic. I mean, to step into that space, a person's brain has to be entirely convinced that this 250-kilogram predator is essentially just a very large house cat. Where does that psychological blind spot even come from?
Well, that blind spot comes from a fundamental misunderstanding of behavioral conditioning. I mean, when people observe an apex predator being fed from a bucket day after day, the human brain begins to categorize the animal not as a lethal threat, but, as a dependent.
Oh, interesting. So the routine is tricking them.
Exactly. The daily routine actively masks the lethality. People see an animal acting calmly in a static environment, and they just assume a permanent change in its nature has occurred.
Like it's somehow cured of being wild.
Right. But the barrier between safety and tragedy in these private facilities is almost entirely psychological. The physical fence is secondary to the mental fence the handler believes they've built through that routine.
That makes so much sense. It's like downloading a user-friendly software patch onto a computer that's running a million-year-old predator operating system.
That is a great way to put it.
Right. Like the software works fine while you're just clicking around the desktop in a completely controlled environment. But the moment you introduce a stress test,
A loud noise or a sudden movement.
exactly, or a break in the routine, the software just crashes. The system instantly reverts back to its base code. And that base code only knows territory, dominance, and survival.
Yeah, and what's fascinating here is the physical biology behind that base code you just mentioned. The crash of that software patch highlights the profound difference between a tamed animal and a domesticated one.
Right, because they are not the same thing at all.
Not even close. I mean, domestication is a physiological genetic transformation. It takes thousands of years. If you look at domesticated animals, generations of selective breeding by humans have literally altered their anatomy.
Wow. In what way?
Well, for example, their adrenal glands, which control the fight or flight response, are physically smaller than those of their wild ancestors. They are biologically wired with lower baseline levels of stress hormones, and they have a higher capacity to read human social cues.
Okay, but a tamed tiger hasn't gone through any of that.
None of it. A tamed tiger has undergone absolutely none of those physiological changes.
So a captive tiger, even one that's born in an industrial park in Germany, possesses the exact same adrenal spikes, the exact same biochemical wiring as a wild tiger hunting in a forest.
It is biologically identical. Taming merely uses routine, predictable feeding, and early human exposure to temporarily suppress the behavioral expression of those wild instincts.
Temporarily being the key word there.
Right. The tiger is tolerating the human presence because the environment is completely static and its immediate needs are met. But After the attack on the 73-year-old man, that static environment just vanished.
Completely. The tiger breached the enclosure and escaped entirely. And that triggered an immediate armed police manhunt through the surrounding area.
Which is terrifying.
A tactical team sweeping an industrial park for a tiger. I mean, the outcome of that search was grim, but it was heavily dictated by the biology we're discussing. The police found the animal outside the enclosure and shot it dead.
Yeah, they had to.
Right. The official statement from the authorities explicitly noted the tiger had to be killed because it, quote, could not be safely controlled, unquote, thereby eliminating the danger to the public.
Which brings us right back to biology.
Exactly. You cannot issue a verbal command to an animal experiencing a massive biologically appropriate surge of adrenaline and fear in a totally strange environment.
No, you can't. And that phrase, could not be safely controlled, is really the ultimate admission that the illusion of taming had completely failed. Once the animal left its designated boundaries, its raw, unpredictable survival instincts immediately took over.
It just reverted to the base code.
Exactly. A displaced, panicked predator cannot be reasoned with or coaxed back into a cage simply because it recognized a handler an hour earlier.
Right, and that biological reality makes the existence of this specific facility incredibly jarring. I looked into the background from the local reports, and this was not an accredited conservation zoo.
No, definitely not.
The facility belongs to Carmen Zander, who is a pretty controversial animal trainer who actively markets herself as Germany's, quote, tiger queen.
Right, the tiger queen.
Yeah. This industrial property she was operating housed 8 big cats in total, including several adult tigers as well as cubs, and it operated purely as a commercial enterprise.
Yeah, and the business model itself relies entirely on sustaining that psychological blind spot we talked about. I mean, to commercialize an apex predator, you have to convince the consumer that the danger has been completely engineered out of the experience.
Here's where it gets really interesting. The website linked to Zander offered paid, unforgettable, and one-of-a-kind tiger petting experiences.
Petting experiences with tigers.
Yes. Visitors were literally paying to physically interact with these animals.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking about promoting close encounters with a predator that, according to the sources, can weigh up to 250 kilograms.
That is over 550 pounds.
550 pounds of muscle and teeth. And the marketing spun this as a safe, intimate connection with nature.
It's why.
It's a real-life Jurassic Park scenario. I mean, you are marketing an encounter with a quarter-ton apex predator as if it's a petting zoo attraction. The jarring contrast between a brochure offering an unforgettable petting experience and the lethal reality of a man being severely injured and the animal being shot dead by tactical police is just staggering.
It really is. And the branding used to bridge that gap between lethal reality and tourist attraction is highly specific.
How so?
Well, the site featured photographs and detailed profiles of the tigers, giving them names like Kiara, Ashanti, and Imana.
Right, giving them human names.
Exactly. Anthropomorphizing the tigers by giving them human-adjacent names and personalities encourages the public to view them through the lens of a domesticated companion. Like, if you name a tiger Imana, you are essentially wrapping a predator in the linguistic clothing of a pet.
Wow, yeah. It softens them.
Right. It actively masks the inherent risk of the situation.
And the sources also point out something quite somber regarding those profiles. Some of the animals featured on the promotional site had already died over the past several years. Yeah. That detail quietly underscores the reality that keeping apex predators in industrial parks is fraught with hidden challenges and mortalities that, of course, never make it into the promotional material.
Right, because the promotional material has largely evolved into social media feeds, which operate as an even more powerful tool for reality distortion.
Oh, absolutely.
Accounts linked to the trainer push this heavily curated narrative, showing images and videos of the tigers inside their enclosures, accompanied by claims that the animals were cared for in a completely safe and animal-friendly environment.
Of course.
Social media curation acts as a filter that just strips away the context of danger.
Yeah. I mean, if you scroll through a feed and see 100 videos of a trainer confidently standing next to a tiger or, tourists posing with cubs, it entirely rewires your risk assessment.
It normalizes the abnormal.
Exactly. The screen creates this false sense of distance and safety, convincing the viewer that if it looks peaceful on a smartphone, it must be peaceful in reality.
And that constant exposure to safe imagery creates a really dangerous illusion, because you are only seeing the successful routine interactions, right?
Moments when the software patch is working.
Right, the moments when the temporary behavioral suppression is holding. You do not see the stress behaviors, the sudden shifts in mood, or the sheer unpredictability of an animal that size.
They cut that out of the video.
Exactly. But the tragic outcome of this Sunday completely shatters that curated narrative. A man suffering life-altering injuries and a tiger being killed by police cannot be filtered out. The illusion of a safe and animal-friendly environment just evaporates the second the physical boundaries are breached and the animal acts on its nature.
And when that boundary is breached, the risk doesn't stay confined to the business owner or the paying tourists. It spills directly into the public domain.
It becomes everyone's problem.
Exactly. Which moves our discussion away from private enterprise and straight into the realm of community safety. The immediate aftermath in this neighborhood was incredibly tense.
I can imagine.
The police confirmed that no other animals escaped during the incident, but they still planned a comprehensive drone search of the surrounding area just to guarantee the security of the site and the neighborhood.
Oh, wow. I mean, flying thermal imaging drones over a quiet suburban and industrial zone to check for loose tigers. That is a stark illustration of how private decisions heavily impact public resources.
Absolutely. And the local government's response reflected that exact tension. District Mayor Thomas Druskat reacted strongly to the incident, publicly calling for the immediate relocation of the remaining animals from the facility.
Which is a bold move.
Yeah, he stated that it was, quote, unthinkable, unquote, what would have happened if the tiger had made it into nearby neighborhoods or encountered bystanders.
He's not wrong.
No, he's not. And I have to act as the voice of that community for a second and push back on the very premise that allows these facilities to exist near residential areas in the first place. Like, is it fair that an entire neighborhood's peace of mind is held hostage by one person's private enterprise?
That's the core question, isn't it?
Right. Local residents were reportedly terrified, and suddenly they are the ones forced to question the structural integrity of enclosures they have absolutely no control over. It's a massive domino effect.
Yeah.
One failure at a private facility instantly turns a public residential space into a danger zone.
Yeah.
Your neighbor's business model shouldn't dictate whether you need an evacuation plan for a tiger attack while you're walking your dog.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this incident acts as a classic catalyst for a systemic national debate. We are seeing a collision of opposing legal and ethical frameworks that is echoing across Germany right now.
And it's a complicated debate.
Very. On one side, you have the perspective of private property and business rights. Individuals operating these facilities, like the Tiger Queen, argue they have a legal right to run their enterprises, manage their animals, and offer these experiences, provided they meet existing local requirements.
Right. But then the local reports make it clear that the animal rights group PETA immediately jumped into this fray following the attack.
As they often do in these cases.
Yeah. They formally urged the German government to enact much stricter laws regarding privately owned exotic animals. Their stance is that the inherent biology of these predators makes private enclosures fundamentally unsafe, regardless of the handler's perceived experience or, the height of the fence.
And this is where the legislative hurdles come into play. In Germany, as in many regions globally, exotic pet laws can be a complex patchwork of local ordinances and broader federal guidelines. Changing them requires overcoming significant bureaucratic inertia.
It's never a quick fix.
Right. PETA's argument relies on the premise that the risk is systemic and unmanageable, whereas private owners argue the risk is localized and can be mitigated.
Right, that they have it under control.
Exactly. However, historically, regulatory law concerning public safety and exotic animals is highly reactive, not proactive. Sweeping changes usually only gain enough political momentum after a tragedy or a severe near-miss occurs.
Only when the worst happens.
Yeah. When the debate transitions from theoretical risk to a 250-kilogram tiger being shot outside its enclosure, public tolerance shifts dramatically and the legislative balance often tips towards strict regulation.
So what does this all mean? We've traced the anatomy of an escape, the biological reality of taming versus domestication, and the fierce regulatory debate it ignited. But the exotic wildlife entertainment economy is a global machine. It operates on the basic principles of supply and demand.
And the demand is entirely driven by the public's desire for those unique, interactive experiences.
Exactly, which challenges you, listening to this deep dive, to examine the ecosystem of wildlife tourism. We all have an innate fascination with nature. But the demand for that perfect photograph or that chance to participate in a petting experience is the exact capital that funds these private enclosures.
Yeah, it's the engine keeping it alive.
Right. If that market disappears, The financial viability of keeping apex predators in industrial parks evaporates with it. We are the ones deciding, through the economy of tourism, what level of risk we are comfortable introducing into these environments and, by extension, into surrounding communities.
It leads to a deeper, somewhat unsettling observation about human psychology.
Oh, how so?
Well, this raises an important question I want you to ponder long after we finish this deep dive. Imagine a near future, and technologically, we are approaching this capability where our desire to interact with apex predators is fulfilled entirely through hyper-realistic virtual reality.
Oh, like a VR tiger enclosure.
Exactly. A simulation where you can see, hear, and feel the presence of a massive tiger, completely eliminating any physical risk to humans and removing the ethical and safety dilemmas of captivity altogether.
A perfectly safe encounter with a wild animal.
Precisely. But if we had access to that perfect zero-risk simulation, would the thrill actually be the same for the tourist? Or is the secret uncomfortable truth that the underlying primal threat of danger, the very real possibility that the psychological illusion of control might fail, is exactly what people are actually paying for?
Wow. Are we paying to appreciate the animal, or are we paying for the adrenaline of proximity to danger? That is a fascinating thought to leave on. Keep questioning the systems that operate just out of sight, and we'll catch you on the next deep dive.
Okay, one question for you. What safety failures inside the enclosure may have led to the tiger attacking its 73-year-old keeper, and could the incident have been prevented with stricter regulations? Don't forget to comment it. Thanks.